Is this live? I don't know if this is live or not. Let's see here. Oh yeah, no, there it is. It's live. Hey everybody. Give people a minute here to sort of trickle in. For those who don't know me, my name's James Hunter. Hey, John. Yeah, my name's James Hunter, and I'm a writer. I've been doing this. Oh my God, I can't see. I have myself pulled up on YouTube. It's awful. It's terrible, but I'll do my best here. I'm James Hunter. I'm an author. I've been a full-time author for about 10 years. I write predominantly lit RPG, and we all know you, James. No, Robert, they don't. I always be hustling, man. You gotta get out there. You gotta say all the things, do the dance. This is part of the game. But yeah, so I've been writing a long time. I started sort of seriously writing back in 2014. I published my first book back in 2015, January 5th of 2015. And I think I published, oh my God, Brian, I almost wanted to ask you to come up and hang out with me so it's not just me talking at the camera. I always feel super awkward by that. Hey, Matt. But yeah, so I published my first book back in 2015, and I think I've written 43 or 44 since then. It's been a lot of books. I've done collab projects, lots of individual standalone books. I've written, I think I have 5 or 6 different sort of series out there. I'll go through kind of some of those. Okay, if things get weird of me just talking to myself, I'm really bad at it. I might invite you up if you're hanging out. But yeah, just a little bit about me. Aside from writing, I also run Shadow Alley Press with my wife, Jeanette. We've been publishing. You don't want Brian to be there with you. I like Brian. As much shit as I give him, even a cookbook. Yeah, as much shit as I give Brian. I genuinely love hanging out with Brian. We have good chemistry. Brian and I do. That's what I say. He says, you need to stay 500 feet away from me by legal mandate of a court. But again, I say great chemistry between Brian and I. So yeah, Shadow Alley, my wife and I run Shadow Alley. We started publishing other people's books in 2017. Thank you, Kyle. I really appreciate that. That's one of my, for those who don't know, the Lazarus series is not lit RPG. That was actually my first series that I ever wrote. It was sort of like tough guy, shoot 'em up action adventure urban fantasy, very like in the vein of the Dresden Files. So if you're a fan of Jim Butcher, you might enjoy those as well. 2017, we started publishing other authors. We published about 300 titles since 2017 on the Shadow Alley Press side of things. Back in the early days, I used to be a lot more hands-on the publishing stuff. Now my super smart and gorgeous wife handles a lot of the publishing stuff, and so I get to predominantly be a word monkey most of the time. But yeah, so I've been doing this for almost a decade, which is depressing. As depressing as it is amazing. My favorite book is War God's Mantle. I am sure you've been busy running your own company. What I want to know is when we get more of those books. So this is I don't know if John is trolling me or not. So War God's Mantle is it's a complicated series. I have a lot of people that really, really enjoy War God's Mantle. I did not enjoy writing War God's Mantle. And even though I think the trilogy turned out really great, the main character is super OP. And I really struggled with those books because I know that the market really enjoys super OP characters. And as a reader, I can kind of understand that. As a writer, it's so boring to write because like they're just awesome badasses and like they can basically do everything and they never really have any like struggle. And so as a writer, I always had a really hard time because I was like, man, these books are fine, but they're so boring to write because there's never really any, at least in my mind on the writing side of things, there's never any like real tension or stakes because like he was just so good and overpowered at murdering things. So Aaron and I have people jokingly ask if we're ever going to write a War God's Mantle book 4. And my answer is no, I don't think we're ever going to write a War God's Mantle book 4. With that said, my buddy Aaron Crash, who I co-authored the War God stuff with, is actually working on a new series in the same vein called Forge God's Mantle, where a guy, a fireman, takes on the mantle of Hephaestus, god of the forge, and kind of has a similar setup, similar premise. But I'm not working on it as a collaboration. I've like helped him outline the book, but I'm not actually going to do any of the writing. He's just going to do that, and then Shadow Alley will publish it. So that's Forge God's Mantle, which I think is going to come out in 2025. Aaron's a pretty prolific writer. Okay, so if you guys have questions, please feel free to pop them in chat. I'm gonna like pitch some of my books, I guess, for people who don't, and then maybe I'll just invite Brian up because I'm lonely. I need someone to feed off of here is what I need, and Brian's great for that. Let me see. I'm gonna message you, Brian. I'm gonna message you with this link. If you want to come up, you can. If not, if you want to abandon me to my cruel, cold, lonely fate up here by myself, that's fine too. Robert asks, do you have a favorite theme across any of your books? From words to long page, that was a step. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so the funny thing I think is that theme. You didn't watch the last panel. You should. It's the apocalypse. Okay, I will have to check that one out as well. In terms of theme, like I'm not like a super artsy writer. Like some writers like really care about like, oh no, I want to make this thematically really cool. Like Brian Norton, he's super like he's kind of up his own ass, and so he's always like, oh man, I really want to make it like thematically important. I don't really care about that so much. I just want my stories to be fun, sort of escapism. So I don't worry as much about theme. And yet, despite the fact that I almost never focus on theme when I'm writing books, they always kind of like pop up anyways. And usually the theme that I tend to find my subconscious like sort of iterating and churning out over and over again is like, how does power change people? When you get power, what does that do? As you become more powerful, what are your responsibilities and how are your choices more difficult? And how are they easier? So like power is usually like, and what people do with it and whether they make good or bad choices is like the theme that sort of comes up over and over again. Hi, Brian.
I think the question that everyone wants to ask is why do you never talk about your urban fantasy career with Strange Magic?
Because that's not what I do anymore. So I started writing urban fantasy. I loved writing urban fantasy. That was kind of like the truth is that I wanted to write epic fantasy, and I realized I was not a good enough writer to write epic fantasy. And that was one of a remarkable point of insight and clarity from a rather dense person, which is myself. Recognizing that like, hey, I'm not a good, like I really wanted to write Wheel of Time. And I was like, oh, I'm not a good enough writer to write Wheel of Time or any epic fantasy because they're too big. The scope is too big. The writing is too nuanced. But like urban fantasy is comparatively, the barrier of entry is way, way easier because it's like first person. It's usually, so you're dealing with like limited POVs. It's usually the pacing is very fast. There's not as much world building because it's like a contemporary setting in most cases. And so like a lot of the world building is already done. So I was like, man, urban fantasy is perfect. I'm a new writer. This is a relatively like easy genre to write in. There's very low barrier of entry. So I started doing urban fantasy and I love doing urban fantasy. I went full time on urban fantasy, which is a particularly tough thing to do since urban fantasy is a pretty crowded market, but I just haven't done it for so long. And the crossover between people who really like lit RPG and the people that like urban fantasy, it's smaller than you think. Like there's not
I think it doesn't exist. RPG, so it's not smaller than I think. I don't think it exists.
It does exist. It does exist, but and this is one of the pieces of advice that I try to give to new authors is a lot of authors think like they'll have success with one series and they'll say, okay, so people like me as a writer. And that's generally not true. Like 9 times out of 10, that's not true. They like that one thing that you wrote that one time. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time before you make a fan as an author. It's like 90% more difficult to convert a fan to being a fan of you as opposed to being a fan of this one particular series and getting them to follow you over. And when you're starting a new series, this is why I always say the second series, like having a big breakout success series is awesome. But the hard part is doing it twice, because it's can I convert enough of my existing audience to follow me over to a new thing, and get them to buy that thing as well? And a lot of the times the answer is no, you can't. And so a lot of authors struggle with that second series out the gate, because they had this assumption that, like, no, it's me, the writer, not this particular story. And if you switch genres, that amplifies it like 100-fold, the chances of people not following you over. And I think that it's even worse in the lit RPG space. Like, people who are lit RPG fans, that's the only fucking thing that they want. And if you try to give them something else, they'll be like, yeah, that's cool, I'm not going to buy that. So you shouldn't do that. And you should try to kind of stay in your lane a little bit, at least early on.
So while you're drinking, I'm just going to gush about you a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and it'll be very, very true, all of it. So one of my favorite things about this man is is that, like, when I was up and coming and I was on Royal Road and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, he sat down with me and unfucked my plot for wild cards, which was wonderful. He didn't have to. He was incredibly busy. He was getting death glares from Jeanette, who was like, you have a million other things to do. And he's like, no, I swear this is important. And so we had that conversation. Jeanette is an absolute delight. I won $1 off her because she didn't know how to spell aluminium. Anyway, so the thing was, like, everyone at Vegas was telling me, Brian, you have to go full time. You have to go full time. This is amazing. And they were, like, essentially projecting what they would want in that same situation, being like, you have a hit, you have Quest Academy 1, this is amazing. But the dissenting voice was James Hunter, because he had seen so many people fail and he never wanted that for anyone else. He wanted to, like, he wanted to see people climb the mountain. He wanted to see people going all the way up. And the fact that he was the dissenting voice for me was perfect, because I'm a cynic and I was like, or a realist, and I wanted that voice. And on the day that I handed in my notice, I was like, am I making the right choice? And 3 hours later, I got a message from James Hunter being like, it's time to hand in your notice. And it was the best day for me, because, like, it was, yes, like, this is it. Now, I have seen James sitting, workshopping, co-authoring, doing so many things with people, trying to help them in their own personal careers, and, like, all the while, like, writing books that begin with the letter V for some reason. Like,
yeah, it must be something subconscious. My wife is like, why? Because we have like a ClickUp table with all the projects in it. And she's like, bro, you got to stop doing this. Make different choices. It's a terrible thing.
No, it must be, like, I don't want to say a man thing, like hyper generalist, but, like, looking at the characters in Quest Academy, it's Vanessa, Villa, Victoria, and they're like, hey, buddy, there's other letters in the alphabet. And I'm like, cool. Let me write my book says Silver Scavengers and Saviors. So it's like V and S are my downfalls. But honestly, it's but yeah, too big to fail. Yeah, 6'4" and 300 pounds. Yes, I am too big to fail. Unless it's health wise, in which case I'll collapse from cholesterol.
No, you have that Rudy glow about you, Brian. It's quite.
Thank you. You say very, very nice things. But I just wanted to highlight that, there's, like, I've been kind of rooting for Shadow Alley Press from the sidelines. Now, I signed with Legion Publishers, but, like, I want to see everyone succeed, and it's very much the James way. At Madrid, he told me, like, I made a publishing house so that I could be surrounded by my friends, and they can't leave me because they're contractually obliged to be my friend.
This is a true story.
It is
real quick, because it's worth mentioning, because there's a lot of really great publishers in this space. Our goal and our model has always been very different, though. Obviously, we care about making money, right? We want the authors that we work with to be able to be full-time, to make the money that they want. But our goal has never been, we want to have 300 authors, and it's not Athon's model. Athon's model is they have a really big umbrella. They have a lot of authors inside that umbrella, and that's great, and that works for them. That has never been our model. When we first started publishing in 2017, it was literally because I had a bunch of friends who I had sort of come up with on the UF side of stuff, urban fantasy side of stuff, who were really, really great writers, who I thought were better writers than me. And they were not having any success indie publishing. And so here I am, I'm workshopping books with them, because, like, we're all like alpha reading each other's books before publication. And I'm thinking, these books are brilliant. I mean, these authors are amazing. They're such good writers. And I remember Eden Hudson, who's my was our very first Shadow Alley author and one of my co-authors on the Rogue Dungeon series and Wasteland Warlords. I think that she's a fantastic writer, a much better writer than I am. And I was reading a book from her, and I said, "Man, when are you going to self-publish this thing?" And she said, probably sometime next year." And this was like 9 or 10 months in the future. I'm like, "Whoa, why are you waiting so long?" She's like, "Well, the last couple books didn't do so good. I don't really have the money to get cover art or editing or any of this other stuff done. So I'm just going to have to like wait and save, and then we'll see what happens." And I thought, that's dumb. Jeanette and I have become accidental publishing experts. You should just let us do it for you. So that was us sort of stumbling our way into publishing, which was really, we had authors who were really great writers and really bad business people. And we thought, well, we've become accidentally good business people. We should just help them. And it's kind of a spiraled and snowballed, but the vision has never really changed, which is, I want to help cool people do the coolest job in the world, and then they have to hang out with me because I'm a deeply lonely man and I need friends. So that's really it. It's lonely. It's lonely. Being a writer is lonely and terrible. And when you have friends that you can like go to cool places with and do writing sprints with, it makes it better. That's it.
So I as everyone knows that James Hunter is an absolute enigma. He doesn't, reveal anything about himself. And like James isn't even his real name. So like the thing is that I really, really want people to know is that I've learned a very interesting fact about James Hunter. And apparently he is obsessed with conspiracies.
That is not, no, what are you talking about? That's not true at all. I'm not obsessed with conspiracies.
So you would feel comfortable putting up your Reddit history?
I don't think so. Dude, that's the thing. My Reddit history is public. I'm on like all the social medias as James Hunter, which was dumb. I should not have done that. No, I do. So here's what I'll say about conspiracy theories. I think most of them are false, but I think they're really fun. I think all of the people, not all the people who believe them are like out of their minds. Oh my God, this is an ongoing theme where my old school house phone keeps ringing during these panels.
It's Jeanette in the other room being like, ha, ha, ha.
But I think that it's fun. And also I'm not, the truth is that I'm not opposed to the idea of conspiracy theories. I think that I think that the government is not above doing shady things. I do think that they're too incompetent most of the time to execute those. As someone who is a former military member and combat vet, I can tell you that everyone has a big giant fucking mouth all the time. Like if you put they can't keep secrets at all. They're like Marines, Army dudes, Navy corpsmen, like all of them. They cannot fucking keep a secret to save their lives. They're so bad at keeping secrets. When we were deployed, they would literally have to cut off communications on bases so that you just couldn't call out because people would just like share all of the military secrets with their spouses or on the internet. So like, I can't imagine you could have something that required like 10,000 people to not talk about it without it with like, there's just no way. There's no way.
Did you see that one? I think it was World of Tanks where there was an argument in the forums and then the fucking guy like released confidential documents to prove someone else wrong, being like,
yeah, hey, it was like the specs of a tank or something. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I love it. I love just how little it took for someone to be like, oh, by the way. So, but just on the publishing house side, just for a very quick second, I just want to say massive congratulations on the success of Unintended Cultivator. It is absolutely doing extraordinarily well. I was so happy to see it, with Shadow Alley Press. Bog Standard Isekai, something like 15,000 followers over on Royal Road. Like it's just excellent stuff.
No, and Miles is one of those interesting case studies. So this is one of the other things I think that is sort of different about our model versus other models is we don't necessarily. I always tell authors that we work with that we're not necessarily interested in one book or one series because almost without exception, you cannot make a career long-term off of one book or one series. And again, there are exceptions. Will White's Cradle series, probably Matt with DCC will probably never need to write another series outside of that. Shirtaloon. So there are a couple, but chances are that's not going to be you. So you just have to know that going into it, that the chances are you're going to have to continue to write. You're going to have to try different series. That's going to happen. So when we bring authors on, we tell them like, hey, it's not always about one book or one series. It's about you. We believe in you as an author. We want to support you. So Miles had actually published a book with us that we really loved called In Another World, I Must Defeat the Demon King, which was sort of this reverse isekai. And I thought that it was brilliant. And it didn't do as well as we hoped. And this is part of the hard truth of publishing reality, is that there are no sure things. Even if you think that you know something's going to do well, even if you throw marketing budget at it, even if things can still fail. I have written books and written series that have failed, at least by my own standard of what I consider success as a metric. Most authors are going to have a flop at some point, even though they're the same author. Their storytelling hasn't dramatically changed. Like, things just fail. And In Another World, I Must Defeat a Demon King is just a series that didn't do what we wanted it to do and what we thought it was going to do. So we went back and we talked to Miles. We were like, hey, let's workshop a new idea. We had workshop Bog Standard with him. We were like, hey, let's run this on Royal Road. I think that this is great. He put in the work. He ran it on Royal Road. It got the traction. And then, he went on and it's had massive success. And I think that that's a big part of it. Like, if you're a writer, just understanding that even if you have a series that doesn't do as well, it doesn't matter as long as you don't quit. In large part, publishing is a numbers game. That's why I have so many books, why I have so many series, is because it's just about it shots on goal. The more shots on goal you take, the better your chances of success are, because it is kind of a gamble. Being a writer is trying to kind of predict where you think things are going and what you think readers are going to respond well to. And sometimes you get it wrong. But as long as you don't give up, you go back to the drawing board, you try again, eventually you're going to find that success.
Amazing. And so Gary Bradley asked about Discount Dan. Is it getting an Audible release?
Yes. So this is my newest series, Discount Dan. Book 1 is done. Book 2 is almost done. And I'm going to roll straight into book 3. This is not out yet on Amazon. You can find it on Royal Road. There should be a link. Also, if you click on my link tree, you can sign up to get an advanced reader copy of this book. With that said, it is going to come out. I think our tentative release date is late February, early March of 2025. This book was supposed to be out a long time ago. But what had happened is that I was in talks with Audible Studios to produce it. And the contract negotiations went on for a lot longer than I thought that they were going to go on. I thought it was pretty straightforward. And instead it was not straightforward at all. And so it took about 6 months longer than I had anticipated it taking to do the contract negotiations. But now, why the fuck do you have Brian on that? Because I don't do well in a void. I need someone to bounce off of. I need the creative energy.
So Boyd's sidekick, the Ghost, where did the inspiration for that character come from?
I'll circle back around. But to finish the Discount Dan one, so the book is going to release early 2025, and it will have an audio release from Audible Studios. Right now, our hope is to get Steve Campbell. So I was originally actually planning on narrating Discount Dan, so I narrated half the book, and then when I signed the deal with Audible, they're like, "Hey, good job, buddy. You tried, but we're going to go with a professional who knows what they're doing." So Steve Campbell had been kind enough to sort of mentor me while I was working on Discount Dan, reveal files with me, work on character voices, on pacing, all this stuff. And so I was like, oh, it's gotta be Steve. So we're hoping that they're in Audible's in talks with Steve right now. And hopefully he's the one that's going to end up producing it. So. Okay. Back to Cal. So the sort of main sidekick character in this series is a ghost named Cal. It's Boyd. Boyd is the main character, and his best friend sort of dies in combat. Boyd gets reincarnated as this. He's a former Marine combat vet. He gets reincarnated as this Witcher-esque monster hunter in this dark fantasy world. FYI, Brian, this was my attempt to write lit RPG that was urban fantasy, because even though it's high fantasy, it reads like urban fantasy. It's very Monster of the Week. There's kind of murder mystery stuff. It's all of the staples of fast-paced urban fantasy, but kind of in this high fantasy lit RPG setting. So he gets reincarnated, but he also gets sort of this spirit guide, which is supposed to be this celestial being of great wisdom and knowledge that teaches him how to do shit. And he's like, no, I don't want the celestial being of great wisdom. I want my best bud who got blown up in this truck. And they're like, this is a terrible idea. You need like to have like a wise ancient spirit that will shepherd you along the path of greatness. And he's like, no. I need my dumb redneck friend because this will be my only chance to get to see him again. And so they're like, well, this is an absolutely horrendous choice, but like, okay, I mean, I guess if this is the deal breaker, we'll give you the guy. So he gets his best buddy, Cal, who ends up being a spirit guide. And Cal is sort of a loose amalgamation of several of my Marine Corps buddies. So for those who don't know, I'm also a former Marine and combat vet. A trigger warning for those who do read Vigil Bound. The first couple chapters, especially of the book, they're a real gut punch. It was kind of me working through some of my own trauma, honestly. And so it's very gritty. I have a good friend, Jodan, who some of you may know. He's a Greenside corpsman who lost his leg to an IED, and he was like, dude, the opening to this book is so good, but I literally had to put it down because I was having like a PTSD flashback because it's so evocative of my experience there. So it's great. And Cal is sort of this amalgamation of a bunch of friends that I had in the Marine Corps who had deployed with me to Iraq. So he's kind of all of them wrapped into one.
So we've only like 5 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you a very, very personal question, and you can absolutely push back on this. So are we allowed to allude at all to a secret project that I've been reading?
No,
Nope.
I mean, I'll tell you guys about it. So I've been working on this project with a guy named Luke Gygax. The title is Son of Blood and Sand. It's second world progression fantasy cultivation story. It's complicated. I'm really enjoying it, but it's very different from things that I've had a tougher time writing it than I have with other projects. Because it's so different from a lot of the other things that I've written. It's much more high fantasy. It's a little bit more literary. The characters are much more complex than what sometimes you typically see in lit RPG. And so I don't know how people are going to respond to it. So I've been nervous about it, but I'm still enjoying the process, and I'm enjoying working with Luke.
Yeah. Oh no, honestly, just from a world building perspective and just like your descriptive writing, like I know you had told me about, was it like aphantasia, like that you you like, it's like, I'm not leaving any of this to doubt. This is what you see. And it is fabulous.
Thank you. That's kind of you to say.
Honestly, like I was like, Jesus Christ, why have I been avoiding reading his books? You know, was the first
it's
thing.
Because of my off-putting personality is generally what it is. They're like, oh my God, that guy is too much. I cannot sit through a 10-hour book with that guy's brain behind it. I mean, I think that's got to be it.
And yes, JD, he is working with the son of Gary Gygax. Luke is an absolute gem of a human. And if you go in with the mindset of like, oh, it's going to be a little nerd, it's like, you will be wrong.
Yeah, no, it's the character. The main character is this guy named Riff, and he's a much darker anti-hero-esque protagonist than the kind of characters I typically tend to write, which is usually like Marvel-esque, good guys win, bad guys lose. And Son of Blood and Sand is a little bit more, where does this guy fall on the spectrum of morality? I'm not 100% sure.
It has the edge without the edgy, if you get me. So it isn't like it comes with an edge, it comes with a personality, it's quietly confident, and it's like that almost like domineering force. And you never know where you stand with this individual, which is wonderful because of the complexity rather than the just like, you know, I'm angry at the world. It's like, no, you know who he's angry with. And it's very
specific rage.
Very specific rage, and it's targeted, it's channeled, and it's very, very, very interesting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how people like, you know, get behind that one, because it's such a fresh take in a different sort of atmosphere.
It's to be clear, it's not grimdark. Grimdark, I feel like the definition for me of grimdark is that characters do not have agency. Like if you read Game of Thrones, none of the characters actually have any agency, and the way that they die shows that what they do doesn't ultimately impact the story in meaningful ways. This is not that. The characters have agency, and the things that they do matter, but the character is more morally grimdark than a lot of my characters. I think that's about our time. If you like my books, you can find them on Amazon. on Audible. You can also find all of the great Shadow Alley books and authors at shadowalleypress.com. There's a link tree that I think is in the chat right here. If you click there, you can find all of my books. And you can also sign up for an advanced reader copy of Discount Dan, which will be delivered to whatever sort of your phone or your Kindle, whatever you want. You can just pick up a copy and give it a read well before it comes out in other platforms. Thank you, Brian, for being a mensch and coming up here. And so I'm not alone and by myself. I appreciate you.
Come on, this is like the highlight of my day.
And
not
go
my
check
previous
out
panel.
Brian's books. Go check out Brian's books. Again, despite him, he is a fantastic writer and his books are great.
I'm going to get that engraved into like a tankard so you don't have to have a mason jar. And it'll be like, despite Brian, Quest Academy is a good series. That's going to be it.
Highest praise. All right. Thank you, everybody.